There are so many notable instances in which we have seen the Digital Millennium Copyright Act be abused by game publishers and developers to either monetize other people's work or to censor criticism. You may recall it was only a month ago that Battlestate Games, developers of Escape from Tarkov, issued dozens of copyright strikes on a YouTube channel simply because they didn't like the negative things the user had to say. But something I've never seen happen is a developer copywriting their own game to fight back against a thieving publisher. The developer in question goes by the name Ammo Box Studios, creators of Eximius Seize the Frontline, a first-person shooter real-time strategy hybrid game. The story first came to light on January 9th, 2018, when Ammo Box posted the following announcement on Eximius' Steam page, which reads, quote, "Dear community, we, Ammo Box Studios, are forced to issue a DMCA notice to our own game Eximius Seize the Frontline. As a result, the Steam store page has been temporarily disabled. So what happened? Long story short, we had to file a DMCA against our very own game on Steam to wrest it off the publisher, the Gamewall Studios. The DMCA has just kicked in, resulting in the game being taken off the Steam store page. Legal action is in process of being taken because the publisher went off-grid and has not made any payment of the sale of the game to developers. The Gamewall Studios has breached publishing agreement and their rights to distribute has been terminated." So what does this mean? Owners of the games can still play the game and receive new updates with no problem. The dev team and the servers are still around and running. It's just that new players won't be able to purchase it for the time being. As of writing, if you bought the game recently through other online distribution stores, the key will still activate on Steam with no problem. We will continue to update the situation as it develops. A more comprehensive version of the story was then posted on Reddit a few days ago on January 21st, 2019. After relaying a short summary noting how Eximius was a passion project that was 8 years in the making, the post proceeded by providing the following details. "We signed up with a small UK publisher a while ago who promised us exactly what we need, ran through contract and legal paperwork with attorney. After launching, promises were broken and delayed. Eventually, money disappeared and we didn't see a single cent 3 months post-launch. We paid for all our dev updates, servers, support services, and publisher totally disappeared. And the worst of all news, the Steam app rights is on their account. They decided to ignore everything. Eventually, we took legal action, but they continued to ignore attorney's demand to return our app ID. As we are already a few months in debt, we cannot afford further legal actions. Even though we are 100% in the correct side of the law and had full rights, nothing could be done without putting in big dollars to go through court proceedings. In total, we lost launch sales, Halloween sale, autumn sale, and a portion of winter sales revenue. Finally, we decided to scorch earth and launch a DMCA on our own title. After DMCA, Steam assisted us by helping us regain the app ID via a proper due process. 4 months post-launch, we are nearly collapsed, full of debts, but finally regained our app ID. We will rise up. In closing, this publisher did not cheat us by manipulating contract law, adding fine prints, or outsmarting us with some Ocean 11 level trickery. All he, the publisher, did was cowardly go into hiding and quietly collect money. The law defaults to letting them get away unless you can pay several years' worth of salaries and wait several months. And no, the law enforcement refused to see this as a case worth investigating. We tried. The arm of justice is long, but slow, expensive, and fueled by souls of attorneys. So the good news is that this story spread fast, and through some quick thinking, Ammo Box managed to get their game back by issuing a copyright claim Steam helped fulfill. The bad news, though, is that this whole ordeal cost them dearly, with the studio having lost a lot of money, time, and resources from falling victim to the publisher's scam. Speaking of the publisher, which goes by the name The Gamewall Studios, one gander at their official website will reveal that a lot about this company is amiss. On their homepage, you'll immediately be greeted with a badge that reads, The Gamewall Studios, Best Indie Development and Indie Publishing Company 2017. There are no details as to which outlet granted them this award. It merely seems to be the publisher self-proclaiming these things. Below that is this excerpt that reads, award-winning indie publishing studio. Ready to launch your game? We can help you rise to the top. Even more suspicious is the fact that if you go to the website's games page, you will see that aside from Eximius, the Gamewall Studios has only published one other game called Guns and Robots. Going to its Steam page will reveal that it's some kind of free-to-play online third-person shooter in which players control customizable robots, and one look at the game's user reviews will reveal that servers have been shut down for a few years now, since as far back as 2016 apparently. Now, looking at the list of games published on Steam by the Gamewall Studios, you'll only see Guns and Robots, but YouTube user Sid Alpha discovered that the publisher's official Facebook page links to a secondary Steam account featuring the same username except with a space between Wall and Studios and with a few additional letters capitalized. This secondary account is publishing 3 other games titled Z-Killer, Spybugs, and a demo for a game called Slinky. Z-Killer is a first-person survival horror zombie shooter developed by Chainsaw Games that launched on early access back in July 25, 2018 for $7 and later went free-to-play on December 19th. From the looks of it, it's been a long time since the game was last updated, with no responses given to community members who have asked for an ETA as to when the game will be finished, leading those few who have played the game to assume that this game is as good as dead. Next up is Spybugs, a game developed by Digital Soul Games that involves players controlling insects upgraded with high-tech weapons. Its reviews reveal that this is also a dead game that nobody's playing and that the developers abandoned. Furthermore, one of the game's forum threads on Steam suggests that there is a story surrounding why development was halted, possibly hinting that this studio was also a victim of the publisher's shenanigans. Last but not least, we have a demo for a game called Slinky, and what's interesting is that while the demo is published by the Gamewall Studios, the final release is self-published by the developers, Titan Forged Games, which is reminiscent of how Ammo Box's Eximius was once published by the Gamewall Studios before they managed to forcibly take the game back. So yeah, for a company that claims to be the best indie game development and indie publishing studio, it sure as hell has a track record of consistent failures. 3 of their published games have completely died out, some before they even left early access, and the 4th has separated itself from the publisher. No matter how you look at it, everything about the Gamewall Studios is incredibly shady, with every game they've touched having turned to dust. And if this recent debacle with Ammo Box Studios is any indication, it's not far-fetched to surmise that all of these other developers were one way or another scammed by this fraudulent company. Now, some of you might be wondering why Ammo Box decided to partner with the Gamewall Studios when the company didn't seem to have a particularly good track record. Well, that's something that was addressed in this Reddit post I previously highlighted. Ammo Box began by admitting that it's ultimately their sole responsibility for what happened and that it was their signature on the paper, but they also explained that while they didn't like the Gamewall Studios portfolio, their discussions yielded a solid contract and some solid strategies, and they also wanted to give an underdog publisher a chance since the studio could empathize with being in that position after having been rejected by many big publishers. Something Ammo Box openly admitted could be called an emotional weakness. Furthermore, one of Ammo Box's investors had pulled out just a few months before the game's launch, putting them in a precarious and urgent position that left them vulnerable to the idea of accepting any publisher that came their way. In other words, there were just a lot of factors that pressured them into rushing decisions that, in hindsight, they shouldn't have made. Desperate times called for desperate measures. Still, nobody could prepare them for the idea that this wasn't just an incompetent publisher, but rather one that would go out of their way to steal from the developer by scamming them out of their own money and product. The following day, on January 22nd, Ammo Box responded to inquiries from website gamesindustry.biz and provided some additional information about the situation. Promises from the publisher were apparently broken immediately after launch when the Gamewall Studios failed to provide services such as customer support and marketing as promised, and on top of that, revenue from Eximius was being channeled directly into the publisher's account, none of it going to the developers who only had enough funds to keep the studio running for another 2 months at best. By the end of October 2018, Ammo Box ran out of money after having paid to upkeep and maintain the game out of pocket, so salaries were delayed and servers were dangerously close to being shut down without the necessary funds, and even then the Gamewall Studios kept finding new excuses to delay payment. Then, by November, the publisher had disappeared completely off the face of the planet, at which point Ammobox explored legal action, which they unfortunately could not afford since they had no access to any of their game sales revenue. That's when they finally decided to take the nuclear option, or employ scorched earth, as they put it, by issuing a copyright claim on their own game on the holiday week of December with the mindset that if they weren't seeing a single cent, then neither should the thieving publisher. Which finally brings us to today. While the studio has succeeded in getting their game back, this entire ordeal has set them back by 6 months worth of revenue that could have gone towards the game and towards paying staff, money that they're now hoping to legally reclaim from GameWall, according to a Discord message posted by Ammobox CEO Jeremy Chu. Making matters worse is that having to fight a war on 2 fronts in the months following the game's launch, with a game to maintain and a thieving publisher to fend off, the game's quality suffered, updates and content releases became less consistent, reviews became more negative, and the player count took a hit as many left under the notion that the game was dying, none the wiser at the time that Ammobox was keeping this game alive with both hands tied behind their backs. The reality is that despite some recent good news and victories, Ammobox has a long uphill battle ahead of them, having to overcome mounting debt and having to rebuild Eximius's player base from rubble and ashes. However, the upside to all this is that this story has gained a lot of traction, giving Eximius more coverage than it's ever had, so the hope is that word of mouth will spread enough to bolster the game's player base and help keep the studio afloat as they recover from this injustice and work towards getting their money back. I also hope this recent wave of press will be enough to bring to justice the con artist who has been disguising himself as a game publisher. The guy's name, by the way, is Eduardo Monteiro, who is listed in UK website Companies House as director of the GameWall Studios since February 12, 2014. The really strange part about all this is that, according to what Ammobox told Games Industry, this Eduardo fellow is the only GameWall employee the studio's ever come in contact with. This has led many to suspect that this company may actually be run by a single scammer, though this is all just speculation. Lending further credence to this is that not long after Ammobox shared their story on Reddit, they got a response from a user going by the name eVinyl, who claimed to be a developer for Slinky, one of the games originally published by GameWall that I previously discussed. By eVinyl's account, Slinky's developers were subjected to a similar scam when they contracted the GameWall Studios as their publisher, stating the following: "Hey, sorry to hijack this thread to talk about my personal experience. I'm one of the developers of a game called Slinky. We originally were also published by the GameWall Studios. Although we managed to get our game back by the publisher itself, we also failed to get most of the income our game made. Our game was actually sub-licensed to Fuse Tomahawk, a console that came out back in 2015, and the publisher took most of what was owed to us. As of 2017, they closed any and all communications with us." So from reading your story, it seems the guy went on a similar approach he did with us. He set up a meeting, talked about a new investor, and some marketing plans he could set up for our game. At that time, he was also looking to invest in the Portuguese game development scene, since the publisher's CEO was Portuguese himself. We were rather inexperienced back then, and we signed a contract with them, knowing their portfolio was not as big as it is today. Afterwards, it was the same as you guys. Promises were made and broken until contact was seized. The only thing they managed to do in the end was to give us Slinky back when the contract expired, out of a sign of good faith, as they put it. In the end, we tried a Portuguese attorney who failed to do anything for us because the contract states disputes to be settled on the UK, and then we tried sending a UK debt collector but failed to have funds to proceed with a court case. I also tried to warn a few indie publisher lists here and there, but to no avail it seems. I hope you guys get further than we did. Good luck. When another user asked who the CEO of GameWall was, eVinyl provided a link to Eduardo Monteiro's page on the UK website Companies House. So in both cases, an indie developer fell victim to a near-identical gambit, and the only person they came in contact with in all that time was this Eduardo Monteiro fellow. Again, this is all still conjecture, but there's a case to be made for the possibility that the GameWall Studios isn't really a legitimate, fully staffed company, but rather just one guy running the same con one that preys on up-and-coming indie developers. After all, Ammobox isn't the first company to have their game taken away and then given back after its funds have been extracted. Titan Forge Games, creators of Slinky, seemingly went through the exact same thing with the exact same company, and I wouldn't be surprised if all the other developers I previously mentioned, whose games were published by the Gamewall Studios, were also scammed in a similar manner. Perhaps it was Gamewall's scam that led them to abandon their respective projects, and perhaps they didn't have the funds or resources to fight back. At the very least, we know of 2 developers who fell victim to the Gamewall Studios' machinations, and at this point, we aren't talking about a game publisher engaging in shady business practices, we are talking about a criminal and a con man who's been leeching indie studios for profit. If left alone, it's entirely possible that Eduardo may move on to his next victim. So if you're an up-and-coming indie developer, be on the lookout for this guy and choose your publishers wisely. Otherwise, you might find yourself in the same shoes as Ammobox, a game development studio that was hard at work on their passion game project before the rug was pulled from under them by opportunists. I truly do wish everyone at Ammobox nothing but the best of luck moving forward, and I hope people out there will show their support towards a developer that did not deserve to be cheated in such an appalling manner. I also must say that I cannot help but admire how Ammobox has dealt with this situation. They could have just called it quits and cut their losses, but instead, against all adversity, they stood their ground and they kept the game alive out of pocket to preserve their creation's integrity and to maintain their community, despite having to deal with an utterly shitty situation. They then fought back with an inspired copyright strike on their own game before helping spread the word about the criminalities of the Gamewall Studios and caution potential victims about this so-called publisher. Judging by their actions, it really does seem like they care passionately about their game, and I can only hope that they'll be able to recuperate their losses, get back on their feet, and go back to improving a rather intriguing game that shows potential. I also hope that this Eduardo fellow, this unredeemable piece of shit, gets what's coming to him, that justice may be served, especially now that word is really starting to get around. With that, I would like to end this news update. Thank you for tuning in. Let us know in the comments below what your thoughts are on Ammobox's unfortunate predicaments, and to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out!